Hello, I am so pleased to be here. I'm Andi Locke Mears, and today I'm teaching a class that I've entitled When GNM/GHK Doesn't Work. What now? How many people try this? They start to learn it and they give it a try and they don't have any results. What is going on? At the same time, somebody else who tries it and uses it and has fabulous results. Okay, so what's the difference? Let's see if we can dig down and figure out why this happens. As we know, Germanische Heilkunde is an entirely new paradigm. Now, the science hasn't changed. It is what it is. And the way we interact with it and find solutions is getting more fine-tuned for some people. In other words, what I'm seeing now are new ways of solving your conflicts and getting results quicker, faster, easier. And that's super exciting. It's faster results, and we're seeing more and more people share their stories about what they're doing. So we still focus on you find a biological solution to the program that you're running, or you change your perspective. Now, how we go about doing these can take a little time. It takes insights, and it can take understanding Germanische Heilkunde well enough. Today, we're going to look at some case studies. We'll identify how the people solved their programs and finished them, and then we'll look at what happens when GHK appears to not work, why that is, and what you can do about it. So first, we'll look at 3 case studies. And I want you to be thinking as we review these, what did these people do? What action steps did they take? So listen very carefully. The first one is a case study with ulcerative colitis. So this client came to me. Now, it wasn't to me, it was another GHK consultant, came to this therapist with a diagnosis of ulcerative colitis. And the information from the doctors was that, we need to do surgery right away and remove the affected parts of the small intestine. Well, she wasn't willing to have surgery. And so she asked this GHK consultant, what options do I have based on Germanische Heilkunde? Though she's female, she's right dominant. She was 46 years old at this time. They did a detailed initial consultation. And then they went in search of the DHS, the conflict shock, which is a morsel conflict. It's an indigestible anger in her life. Something happened. When was it? They did a long search, and I don't know how long, if it was hours or if it took weeks and weeks. It may have. But they did find the trigger for the conflict. And it was a perceived and felt ingratitude within her family because of a favor she had done for her family before the symptoms began. She did a favor, she was not recognized. She wasn't acknowledged. Now that in and of itself wouldn't have been that bad, but it was, as they say, the straw that broke the camel's back. This had been going on for many, many years. This was the time that she just couldn't take it anymore. So while working with this particular consultant, she wrote an anger diary. And that means she kept documenting situations throughout her day when she was annoyed. And so they looked at each one of these. Now, this person evidently did a technique with her to help her put it into perspective. I don't know what the technique was. But it was something that made it so that the situations that she came up with no longer had as much sting to them. It's an indigestible anger conflict, and she was able to, by talking it through, realize and see it from a different perspective, so it didn't have as much charge to it. Over a period of 3 months, her bowels calmed down more and more, and ultimately they showed no reactions or symptoms. In the meantime, she had stopped taking her medication, and she most certainly avoided surgery. At the end of their work together, she wasn't able to laugh about the conflict, which is one way you know that it has solved, when you can laugh about it. But she had learned how to behave in order to avoid experiencing such a conflict again. She had put it into a different perspective. Now, she also had anemia and thrombosis. Those were caused by the medication she was taking. So when she no longer took the medication, those symptoms went away as well. So the bulk of what she did was working on finding and analyzing the beliefs and working with her subconscious to change those beliefs about all those things that occurred throughout her day that made her angry. Let's look at another example now. This case study is about a woman who was diagnosed with Parkinson's. She's female, right dominant, 59 years old. The conflict was in the right hand. It was trembling. She also had some anxiety about this, muscle rigidity, and slowness of movement. Parkinson's is a motor conflict, which means she felt stuck. She couldn't hold on to something. She couldn't let go of something. It often happens with Parkinson's that you see the symptoms appear apparently long after the conflict shock. And you'll see why in a minute. The first symptoms in this case occurred many years after the client had left a special religious group. In this group, she had experienced fear, loss of control, violence, subordination, obedience, and power exercised over her on a regular basis. And these incidences can be traced back to a very specific person, and this client had a high emotional attachment to this person. So there were many events that could have led to the corresponding DHS, the conflict shock, in that client's perception at least. And so what you do when you can't quite figure out what the one single conflict shock was is that you look at the entire time and you look at the bulk of what happened in that time, and you consider them as the entire series of events as one DHS. You just use that amount of knowledge and data as, oh, that's the beginning point. These issues that occurred with me were my DHS. So why did it take several years for the symptoms to appear? This is where you have to look at the tracks. The years between leaving the group and the onset of the symptoms is explained in retrospect by the fact that she still accepted the meaning of this religious group for herself. Even though she was no longer a member of it, she no longer had contact with them, but she still believed in what they believed. And what does that mean? It means she was keeping it alive through tracks of the beliefs in the same beliefs as what this religious group had. Now, over time, she lost a connection with these beliefs, and certainly with the group. But it's when she lost that inner connection and she started expanding her horizons and looking at other beliefs, that the beliefs from that group stopped to be a track for her, and that was the solving. That's when she started to have the healing phase, which is what we'd call Parkinson's. It's not still fully resolved. However, there was enough so that it began the healing phase. This woman worked with this GHK consultant for quite a while, and it was fairly intensive. Weekly video sessions and daily correspondence and daily phone calls, daily chats. What they were trying to do is to look at every belief system she had throughout her day and how it could be traced back to that group. And again, they started to look at it from a different perspective. So she worked on this every day, and she had support every day. And they worked together for only about 8 weeks. It was about 2 months. And throughout that time, she reduced her Parkinson's medication, and she got off of it completely. And she no longer had any sort of tremor in her right hand. So what does this case study have in common with the first one? The answer that I saw is that, well, they both had constant support with another person. They were constantly every day working with somebody else, processing it on a daily basis. working through it, not just once a week or a couple of times a week. It was every single day. So it was an intensive daily processing of the causes, the analysis of all of it. Let's look at another case study. This is a woman who presented with a herniated disc and torn tendon, a female, right dominant, 59 years old. This was one morning in August of 2023. She woke up with a stiff neck, and it intensified over the following days and into a very severe pain in her cervical spine. There was also numbness and pain in her right arm. She was diagnosed with a slipped disc in her cervical spine. And since there was no improvement for months, she also had cortisol and anti-inflammatory drugs. That was in December of that year and also January of 2024, the next month. That gave her just a short-term relief. So remember, this stiff neck occurred in August. So she had meds in December and the next January. The next month in February, she was introduced to Germanische Heilkunde. She was able to find the conflict. She was able to find the solution, which was the herniated disc, was already in the healing phase then, and she found the tracks. What happens with this is cell loss in the conflict active phase. This is self-devaluation. Once you go into the healing phase, then everything swells up, and that disc will then herniate. Remember, things have weakened, so the area and structure around the discs is weaker. And so now with the edema from the PCLA phase, the healing phase, it will squeeze and herniate. Now, the original conflict shock, she had been working as a care worker in a closed residential community for adults. She'd been there for many years, and in April 2023, she was grabbed by one of the residents. This person grabbed her by the neck and the shoulders and shook her, verbally abused her, and spat in her face. She was completely alone. There were no colleagues around, no other residents, but she was able to free herself and run away. This caused her to experience an intellectual or moral devaluation conflict, and it remained active as she continued to work at the same place after the incident. Her workplace was her trap. Every time she went back there, she stepped on a track and experienced more self-devaluation. She had a short period of sick leave, and then once she went back to work, she realized that she didn't enjoy it as much as she had before. So she decided in July of 2023, several months after the incident, to ask the pension insurance institution how much longer would she have to work until she could retire. So in August, we're back to August here, 2023, she received notification that she could retire as early as June of 2024, the next year. This was the solution for her. She was crying with joy, and the slipped disc followed, and the track was clearly her job, which was why she was unable to complete the healing phase. But once she knew she had an end point, that was the resolution. She did end up having a longer sick leave in March and April of 2024. Remember, she learned Germanische Heilkunde in February. In March and April, she was on a longer period of sick leave, and with retirement in June, it was right around the corner, she was able to complete the healing process and all her symptoms disappeared. Yay! Now, the pain and numbness in her right arm resulted in a motor conflict and a loss of self-esteem in her right arm, causing muscle weakness and necrosis of the flexor tendon. Usually that's undetected. In March of 2024, though, the month after that she learned Germanische Heilkunde, a tendon rupture occurred during an everyday movement, and that led to the additional sick leave that she had. And you'll find this, it's fairly common when people have something that happens, skeletal muscular issues, and they're just doing everyday tasks. That's a huge clue that there's more going on here than we realize. And it looks like it's an injury, but really, this person's in the healing phase. So that's the third one, the third case study. What did you observe from the 3 case studies? I'll go through a few of the points that I saw, at least. They found their original DHS, their original conflict shocks, so they understood the starting point. They knew what program was running in their body, and thus they knew what to expect throughout the PCLA, epicrisis, and PCLBs. That's important. So there's not a mystery. We're having fear of what's going to happen to me. They also worked with their subconscious and another person to reprogram their thoughts. Or, like our last case study, she found a biological solution. I'm retiring. That's a biological solution. Perfect. She realized it will never happen again because she won't be going back to that workplace again. So if you change enough, either through personal inner growth, or you change an element in your life so it really can't happen again, then that resolves it. Oftentimes, by connecting your subconscious with the symptoms, it resolves all of the tracks downstream. Now, what do I mean by this? When you can put it into perspective, well, it happened 5 years ago. Are you the same person you were 5 years ago? No, nobody is. Many of your cells and molecules in your body have been replaced. You're literally a different person. So even though the incident, it's possible that it could happen again, when you realize that, oh, well, that was 5 years ago, I have grown, and the chances of it happening again and impacting me the same way are very, very small. I'm a different person now. I will recognize it instantly, make instant changes if it happens again, and therefore I will not have a hanging healing, nor much of a healing phase at all, especially if I downgrade it in 5 seconds. That can be very, very important to do and optimal as well. Also, we can have, I'll say, priming beliefs that set us up for DHSs, the things that we're told when we're children or teens, the things that we've learned. We learn to expect things, and then when we have that conflict shock, it's like, oh yeah, I'm sure that's been with me all my life, even though it really just happened when you were, 25, 35, when you were older. We'll come back to this. What I want to look at now is, what are the steps that you take? The first step is, what are the programs that are running? So let's say you've already figured that out. That's great. And then you have to develop your timeline. The timeline is so very important. And take time with this. I often see people take 1 to 2 months to do a timeline, or at least several weeks. You might get a lot written down in 10 minutes. But if you're not finding your original conflict shock, then it's going to take some time. And it's going to take some digging. I recommend talking with family members or friends who knew you back then when the symptoms started. This is the detective work that we do. By talking with other people, it allows us to get more insights and to allow the answers to literally come into our consciousness. So take time to develop that timeline. That is really vital. So what happened? Find that original DHS, and even if this original DHS was in utero, and you're never going to remember what happened when your mother was pregnant with you, but what you can find out is what was going on in mom's life. And sometimes just having that amount of information is all we need to find a solution. In other words, well, my mom left my dad when she was 6 months pregnant. That's all we need. We know that there was a major change going on, a lot of controversy, a lot of distress in your mother's life. That came right through to you. We know the program running, so now we have an idea of what happened. So you want to get enough information for your mind to latch onto. And of course, that will be different for everyone. Number 4, find your tracks. So observe yourself now. If you've had this since you were 10 years old, you have a rash since you were 10, well, what's going on? You know the original conflict shock. What aspect of that is still active in your life now? So if it's related to a separation conflict, you had a rash, separation conflict, let's say your mother went back to work. So what was that like for you? You felt isolated, alone, not protected. And so now you're 40 years old and you still have a rash. Where in your life do you feel isolated and not protected and all by yourself? Then that's your separation conflict. That's the track, keeping it active. This is the hard work to do, right? So find a biological solution or do the work it will take to change your perspective or turn it off. The bio switch. And oftentimes, if you've had a hanging healing for years and years and years, the original conflict is resolved. However, you're keeping it active because of the associations you have with it. And what do I mean by that? It's the beliefs and the identities you've accepted about yourself as truth. Oh, yeah, I was the party girl, so I'm not surprised I have this kind of cancer nowadays. Or the belief that, oh, there's something wrong with my uterus. Something's always been wrong with it. Or something's wrong with my gallbladder. I've had problems with it for years. All of these beliefs can perpetuate your biological programs. Or, oh, I've had this for so long, I doubt I'll ever find a solution. Well, you probably won't then. It just keeps you stuck. You've given up hope because nothing's worked. And nothing's worked because you haven't used Germanische Heilkunde yet. Just saying. I see some people who have spent their life's savings on all kinds of techniques and therapies, and they have no hope and they're at the bottom of the barrel. Thankfully, they learned Germanische Heilkunde, and they learned why. None of the remedies worked, the modalities they did, the medications they did, the techniques they learned. They understand why those didn't work. It's because they hadn't resolved their original conflict shock, or they were stepping on tracks that activated the program again. All your fears, doubts, identities with the diagnosis. Oh, you have diabetes. Oh, I'm a diabetic. You take it on as an identity. It's just a program. It's just a biological program. How are you keeping it active? And I'm not saying you want to resolve your diabetes if you're injecting insulin. You do not. However, you may be able to reduce the amount of insulin you're on. So if we follow these steps, we would, in essence, finish our programs. But how many of us try this and it doesn't work? What prevents GHK from actually working? We often flounder in the beginning, especially because we believe we don't know how to do this or how to figure it out. I've tried and tried. I've written down a timeline. I don't see anything. I've tried to figure out when it started. I don't remember. I've tried to create a biological solution, but I don't know how to. Nothing's working. You think you know how to change your perspective. I'm just going to use affirmations, and those don't work. Or we don't believe in ourselves enough. We don't trust ourselves, nor do we trust Germanische Heilkunde. What it may take is a new skill set so that we can do this consciously, and that's why you're here. You truly do know how to use Germanische Heilkunde. If you've ever had the common cold, you have used this. You've had an annoyance or sense of danger, conflict. You were conflict active. You found a solution, and you went into your healing phase. You already know how to do this. If you've ever had a fever, you know how to do this. If you've ever had a rash that went away, you know how to do this. We have to make that process that was unconscious, we now need to make it conscious for you. Now, so many people tell me they've done their timeline and they couldn't find a DHS. Well, first of all, you have to write it down. You have to get it out of your mind and onto some paper. And when you do this, you're using a different part of your brain and you're using different senses. You're seeing it, you're touching the pen that's writing. This is important. When you can't find the original DHS, talk to a loved one who knew you then, or a friend. If you still can't find it, then back out a few steps. What is your conflict about? You know because you know the program running, so therefore you know the idea. Is it a separation conflict? Is it a nest worry conflict? Is it self-devaluation? So you know that. And again, when you trace it back to, it happened 5 years ago, what was happening in your life 5 years ago? XYZ happened. And so now you're starting to put together, okay, for me, my psyche, brain, organ, intelligence interpreted that as a nest worry conflict or as a self-devaluation. Sometimes that's all you need to do is connect those two, those series of events that occurred back then. How do you create a biological solution? You've done it before. How did you do it? Can you remember the last time you had a symptom, you solved something? And especially when that symptom, you went through both the conflict active phase and the healing phase, and that's awesome. So it is common sense and it is practical to find a biological solution. It's often do the opposite. You lost your job? What's the biological solution? Get a new job, right? It is not rocket science here. But to come up with that, you have to sometimes access a different part of your brain. And to access that, it means talk to someone. When somebody is actively listening to you, you will be able to tap into a different part of your brain and have more memories come through. Also, if we get stuck in our beliefs and our identities, what do? All the things we've told ourselves, all the beliefs, I'm such an awful daughter, I'm a terrible mother, anything like that. Take a piece of paper right now and write down the 2 or 3 general themes you've had throughout your life that you might have on a daily basis. And there might be more like 10 themes that you have. And it can be super simple. When my husband comes home late, I'm so overwhelmed. Just write that down. I'll never figure this out. If that goes through your head several times a day, write that down. Let's say your mother calls you every week, and every time afterwards, you're feeling pretty unsettled. Write that down. Ideas like, I'm never going to be good enough. All this self-talk we do, I'll never get ahead. I'm such a loser. Oh, my kids hate me. My parents were terrible parents. They're still terrible parents. All of these are tracks. So it takes a hypervigilance to look at what you're doing on a daily basis to keep your program working, to keep your program active. And it's taking all of those thoughts and beliefs and identities and finding a solution to those. Well, instead of focusing on what my husband doesn't do for me, I'm going to focus on what he does do for me. It's as simple as that. Simple in concept, not always easy because you've got to catch yourself every single time. And pretty soon you're realizing, oh my gosh, I catch myself 50 times a day, 100 times a day. That's right. And so if you then switch to focusing on what he does for you, then within a few days or weeks, you're no longer going to trigger all those things that he doesn't do for you. You're not going to think about them anymore. And therefore, your program turns off. It never gets re-triggered to turn on again. So take some time to write all of this out. Write out your timeline and start to look at what are your tracks. Talk with somebody else to find them. I want to share one more case study here. And I recently spoke with a woman who was in a practicum for one of my students who goes through my Germanische Heilkunde for Professionals course. Every one of the students has to do a practicum. They have to work with someone at the end of the program. And so I spoke with this woman who was one of the clients, and she did a great job. The student of mine did a great job with this client, and the client did a great job as well. And so at the end of several sessions that they have to have at least 4 sessions with their clients. At the end of at least 4, I think they had a few more than 4, this client had a totally different demeanor at the end of working together. So she was really thrilled. Wow, this is amazing. I feel totally different. She's not triggering things anymore. She realized how she was doing that on a daily basis. And so then a few weeks later, something happened. And she went back to all of the symptoms she had had for years. And what was that? For her husband's overtime got cut. So financially, they were now in a bind. And that triggered her a lot. At the same time, her mother, who lives very far away, went into the hospital. And she kept asking her, when are you going to visit me? When are you going to come see me? And at that point, she didn't have the money to do that or the ability to just leave and go visit her mother. So she felt even worse. And you can imagine the self-talk that went on. This was really hard. And it's hard for anyone when you make progress and you have a relief of symptoms. They're gone. And then they come back again. This might be you. You go from being hopeful and feeling really good and upbeat. You feel like, I've made really great strides in my life. My life is different now. My symptoms are gone. Yay, GHK works. And then something happens and all those symptoms are right back. Again, this isn't rocket science. What just happened? You either just stepped on a track and you're now conflict active or constellated, or it simply got re-triggered. And if it's a constellation, it might have been frontal lobe, paranoia, mania. It could have been any other territorial conflict, and now you're manic. It really doesn't matter which one right now. All you need to know is that in all of this, you're conflict active again, and you've stepped on a track, and now the symptoms return again as well. And what happens there is that when you step on that track, you're conflict active for an instant, or you simply go right into the healing phase and that symptom comes back. And you may be growing cells or losing functionings, or now you're in a healing phase and now it's uncomfortable. And this isn't what you want at all. It's time to become conscious and connect the dots. So for this woman, when she realized when her husband lost overtime and her mother went into the hospital, it started all the programs again. So you go back to square one, but it's easier this time. You've done it before. You can do it again. Look at all the thoughts throughout the day. And can you find a biological solution? Can you borrow some money and go out and see your mother? Borrow money from somebody and have a repayment plan. And so you're feeling secure in all that. And you go see your mother. Or maybe you realize, well, I can get a part-time job and help with the family finances. You start to get creative here. Take action, though. I'm going to encourage you not to just stew in your own thoughts. Take action. The more action that you can take on finding solutions, the quicker and sooner you'll find that actual solution. Always be conscious of your thoughts, though, as well. Old thought patterns have taken over again and flooded your brain, tripping over and over again. And maybe you see yourself as a victim. There, I always try new things and they never work, right? So many people have that belief. So we need to stop that. You've ended these programs. You were successful with that. You can do it again. Once you realize you've stepped on a track, you are in the driver's seat again. Let's look at what's going on in your brain. This is a brain that has no conflicts. Each hemisphere is vibrating in its natural rhythm and vibrating together. Here is a brain that has a conflict shock here. Here's our little DHS. And now this hemisphere is vibrating according to a different pattern than the other hemisphere that's still vibrating in its natural pattern. So what you know right now is that this is compulsive thoughts. This is conflict activity. Again, this is physiological. It's happening in your body, in your brain, literally. But you may not think this is significant because your old themes and thoughts are now running nonstop in your brain. And you're not aware of this different pattern of vibration in your brain. And you're maybe too worried about it. Well, you're conflict active, so you're supposed to have more energy to focus on solutions, on finding solutions. But not so conflict active that you get lost in these old thoughts and beliefs, and they take over your life again, which is the pattern that we have in our modern lifestyles. The constant thinking is to help you find a solution. The problem is we've never known it, and again, this is when we've tried to make sense of it in our life, and we develop those beliefs and identities that repeat over and over again. And this is when you have two conflicts, one in each hemisphere, and so now you're double conflict active, that's double sympathetic atonia, which means each hemisphere is vibrating out of its natural rhythm and out of sync from each other. This is a constellation. There's an instant behavioral or mood change. That's important to understand too. So what can you do? Action steps to take when you're conflict active again, you've stepped on a track and your symptoms have returned. And so you can be triggering your brain 1,000 times a day. Conflict active healing phase, which is why those symptoms seem chronic. And you also seem like you're chronically conflict active. First of all, recognize when you are conflict active. How do you know? You are compulsively thinking about something, anything. It occurs after something happens that's distressing, although you may not recognize this because it is such a part of your life. They say that fish can't see the water. They're too close to it. It's the same with us. It's a distressing thought you had. Someone said something that was upsetting to you. You saw something happen, etc. We're often so stuck in our repeat thoughts and beliefs and identities. Acknowledge that you're conflict active. Once you recognize it, acknowledge it. Talk out loud to your psyche brain organ or your subconscious. Wow, thank you, psyche brain organ, or thank you, subconscious, for making me conflict active again. Every conflict activity like this is a life and death situation, according to your psyche brain organ. So now you need to get real. Are you in a life and death situation? No. So therefore, you can start to downgrade it. So thanking your psyche brain organ or your subconscious is a small step to help you get out of victim mode. And that's what we need. We need you in the driver's seat. Oh, I'm conflict active. Okay. Well, thank you, Psyche, for turning that on because of what just happened. And remember, too, that the obsessive thoughts that you have will feel like they are true. I have proof my parents were bad parents. But right now, you're an adult reliving something from your childhood, and that is not your current reality. That's from 30 years ago. It's no longer real for you, but it really feels real because your mother just did X, Y, Z, and you just can't believe it. Has always been a bad mother or a bad father. You've got proof, more proof, right? That's a slippery slope. Even if your parents are still bad people, you are not a child. There is a difference between you now and you as a child. But we often don't see that or we don't believe it. The repetitive thoughts are producing an altered state for the purpose of finding a solution, but we get too lost in these thoughts and the feelings. Next step, discover what happened that made you conflict active. Say it out loud, too. Wow, I am totally conflict active right now. Oh, it's because of that phone call that I just had with that upsetting news. Look for the track. You just stepped on it. You are not a victim, but you do need to take action. Address your brain's vibration. It's vibrating out of sync, a little bit or a lot. As long as it does, you will be conflict active. You'll be in fight or flight. So acknowledge that at least one hemisphere is vibrating out of sync, and then take some action. That's what I would recommend. What do? Address your brain's altered state. Well, remember each hemisphere is vibrating out of sync from its normal, natural rhythm and out of sync from the opposite hemisphere. So it can be addressed physiologically with the sole purpose of helping you downgrade this so you can think clearly enough to find a solution or change your perception. That last sentence was really important. Again, your brain hemispheres are vibrating out of their normal rhythm and out of sync from the other opposite hemisphere. This is physiological. So you can address it physiologically just with the sole purpose of helping you think a little clearer enough so that you can find a solution or change your perspective. There is no one way to do this, and you have to figure this out for yourself, but here are some ideas. Take a walk or ride a bike. This is bilateral action. Science shows that many different parts of the brain are impacted when we are doing something bilaterally. In other words, we've got two hemispheres and we're using our body in a bilateral action that will help it to become more in sync with what we're doing, like walking or riding a bike. By doing something like this vibration can go from this to getting a little bit more in sync because we're addressing it physiologically. Not to mention that something like serotonin levels can increase when you start pedaling a bike. Activities such as this contributes to feelings of happiness and well-being. That's good in this moment. And walking as well. That's bilateral work. We have something called Psych K, which are doing like bilateral things, and such as, doing something as easy and simple as that is working on my brain bilaterally. So reversing my hands, clasping them and bringing them towards me is a movement that can help just get your brain a little bit more in sync. A tuning fork with a circuit boot used on your brain. I use the sonic slider from Biofield Tuning. You can do what works for you. Also, the 432 hertz music that we know, the Mein Student in Machen that Dr. Hamer wrote, that works very similar to the tuning fork in that both ears are hearing the same vibration. And so by doing the same vibration on each side, now your hemispheres get more in sync. I use the tuning fork with the circuit boot, which is this little piece right down here, and this is weighted. So I hit it, and then I can go back and forth on my brain from hemisphere to hemisphere. And that just helps it start to vibrate more cohesively, more coherently, more together. There is a technique called the Brains Technique as well by Whitney Nadiello. Go to brainstechnique.com. That's all one word, Brains Technique with no comma. And that has been very, very helpful for folks here. We had a hurricane 6 months ago in my location, and she worked with a lot of the first responders to help them downgrade their conflict activity because it was very, very stressful. So it's an amazing technique that is wonderful. I also use something called a Chi machine from HTE. There are many knockoffs out there, but that is a machine. You put your ankles into it and it just kind of rocks you back and forth and your whole body kind of moves and it works on the two hemispheres. So it can be very simple. Take a walk, ride a bike, get a tuning fork, or you can get a little bit more complex, learn the Brains Technique, or even buy a Chi machine. It doesn't have to cost a lot, for sure. But address your brain's altered vibration, and it will help you to downgrade so you can find a solution. Next, I'm going to say, have a list of 10 things that you can do in the moment. So have a little notepad and Write down 10 solutions that, when you're thinking straight, are things that help you to find solutions, like talk to a friend, talk to your partner, or maybe getting a massage helps you if you're conflict active, just to kind of downgrade yourself if you're really, really upset. I tend to go horseback riding because when you are horseback riding, you have to be in the moment. You can't be worried about anything. And sometimes if I don't feel like I'm safe enough to ride, if I'm too upset, I'll just go and be with the horses and groom them and take them for a walk. That's my therapy. You do you. Find what you need to do in the moment so that you are feeling more balanced. And as soon as you are able, assess the situation that occurred and start to brainstorm. Your husband just lost his overtime. Money's going to be tight. How will you pay the mortgage next month? Brainstorm this and allow it to be creative. Use all your senses. So go get large pieces of paper. Put them on your wall. Get some pretty markers and start just brainstorming. Just get yourself outside your head. Bring in your other family members. Okay, everyone, what are we going to do to pay the mortgage next month? Assuming that they're older, they're not little children. Or talk with your partner. What can we do? Maybe your son was just arrested and you have no idea how to navigate the judicial system or find a lawyer or anything. In this case, your brainstorming might be listing out people who can help you. And when you start listing, you realize, oh my gosh, the library has resources for this. And so now you know you can go down to the library and get some help. So by doing this, you're downgrading your conflict active phase. Keep your friends, your family, your local contacts close while you figure out things to do. What your goal is here is to get into a position to either find a biological solution or change your perspective. One of the most important things I was told by a European who learned from Dr. Hamer, I had asked him, what's the most significant thing you learned from Germanische Heilkunde? You know what he said to me? He said, I learned how to communicate. I'm like, what? What does that mean? It's not what I expected to hear. It means that when we're conflict active, our brains don't think as rationally as usual, which means our interpersonal skills are more limited. So acknowledge this. Wow, I'm really conflict active and I always lash out at my kids when this happens. That's an old pattern of behavior. When I lash out, I'm fretting all the time. So I'm going to do something different. I don't know what, but I'm going to do something different. Oh, I'm going to tap my brain differently. Going to get my tuning fork. I'm going to call my girlfriend and talk with her. Acknowledge that you're conflict active, that your brain hemispheres are vibrating differently, causing repetitive thoughts, repetitive behaviors, and repetitive reactions. So what can you do? When you're not constellated, consider increasing your skills, interpersonal skills, communication skills, empathy skills, self-awareness skills. How can I learn how to communicate better? Learn how to listen, how to have empathy, how to use your body language, how to ask questions, how to have empathy. Conflict resolution. Read a book about emotional intelligence. Learn how to show respect and create effective boundaries. Learn how to trust others. Learn how to adapt no matter what happens. Now, I can imagine that not every one of us had parents who never argued, who always stated their needs clearly. They never got mad at us. They always listened to us actively, right? No. No one has parents that are perfect. So we maybe have not learned to do these. We don't have these skills. There are literally thousands of organizations out there that can help you get started. Learn how to listen, learn how to do all of this. When we learn how to listen or have empathy, or how to use our body language, how to ask questions, then we learn how to move forward in a different manner. When we move forward in a different manner, we get different results. And our symptoms can go away, or they don't get re-triggered again. These skills are what allow us to use Germanische Heilkunde more effectively. Once you have more skills, you have more self-awareness and an increased ability to take action when you are conflict active, instead of just repeating the old thoughts and behaviors. In 1936, Dale Carnegie published How to Win Friends and Influence People. 1936. It's one of the best-selling books of all times, all around the world. And he offered very simple advice. Be a good listener. Don't criticize, don't condemn or complain. Try to see things from another one's perspective. He sold 30 million copies in 36 languages. And so his book reminds us that a desire to improve one's interpersonal skills, it resonates with people, and it has for a long time. Like I said, there's lots of different programs. We're all in different parts of the world, so see what you have in your part of the world. I joined Toastmasters. That is all over the world. Find a local Toastmasters. That gives you confidence in speaking. It teaches you how to think and speak at the same time. It's fabulous. Biological societies didn't have to learn these skills as adults. They were built into their societies. And as children, they learned them through the enculturation process. We don't have that as much anymore. Let's look at one more case study, and I want you to look for the elements that I've mentioned so far. This is a female, and we don't know her handedness. She was about 40, a little over 40 when she started working with her GHK consultant. She was diagnosed with bipolar, depression, and mania. She said that she had a partner 17 years ago who treated her badly. He belittled her every day, said she couldn't do things, that she was stupid. He didn't like to leave her alone, and she was beaten from time to time. Now, he owned the house that they built together and said that as long as they were together, it was ours, it was theirs, otherwise not. And she felt less and less comfortable, and she started drinking alcohol every day. When she finally decided to leave him, he didn't want to let her take the daughter as well. He said, "You can leave, but our daughter is staying with me." On the night of her 35th birthday, she got drunk and she fled out the window with her daughter, who was 6 years old. A friend picked them up and took them to his farm. That night, she stopped drinking and she became manic. Interesting. She stops drinking, she becomes manic. And for 3 weeks, she didn't sleep more than 3 hours a night. This was nature's way of helping her to build a new life. It gave her the energy to find that solution. So within 3 months, she had bought a very old house for herself and her daughter, and they moved in. So after about another 6 months, she started drinking again, and she became depressed. Well, she ended up falling in love and starting a new life. And yet within 3 years, they moved 5 times, and she was slightly depressed and unhappy again. After about 7 years, the relationship came to an end, and so she decided to stop drinking. After 3 days of stopping, she became manic again. And again, she didn't sleep at all. She was also fairly psychotic. After about 2 months, she ended up in a psychiatric ward. And she was forced to take medication. The psychiatrist said, "Well, this is incurable. You're going to have this forever, and you'll have to take these psychotropic drugs forever in order to participate in social life." These drugs were more to stop her very high manic mood. But without sleeping pills, she couldn't sleep. So she was stuck in this cycle of drugs and sleeping pills. So then she learned Germanische Heilkunde, and gradually she started to understand the causes. She made connections. She had a constellation. And the first conflict stemmed from the childhood vaccination, she thought, and the associated fear and anxiety about it. She was a very introverted child, very shy. The second conflict, she thought, was much later in her partnership at the age of 30. And then she realized that alcohol was a track, and she drank it on the night of her escape. So she realized when she was sober, she was manic, and when she was drinking, she was depressed. So she'd step on a manic track when she was sober, and she would step on a depressed track when she was drinking. She started to understand why this happened and how this happened. So now she was more in the driver's seat, and it took several years here to get through this. She decided to take various training courses to develop her own self-awareness. Emotional training is what she called it. And with emotional training, she found the most effective way for her to resolve various conflicts. And it involved acknowledging her emotions and acting out her feelings. When she did this, it was a key to her inner peace and lasting happiness. Now, how you do this is individual for each one of us. You have to find what works for you. And again, it may take several years to develop the skills. So that was the method that she used. She took this training and applied it to herself. And then she became qualified as an emotional trainer herself. And now she works with clients, and she's attracted the partner of her life. So using her own experience, she's able to help others, which is awesome, right? This is how it works. So the constellation, the bipolar, depression, and mania, was resolved through awareness, effort, and interpersonal development. She literally stopped being bipolar. It's a great story, right? And it is a true story. So what is one element that is super important as you go through this process? What have we learned so far? Support. Find a knowledgeable GHK person, get a GHK buddy, start your own small group. Who else can you talk with? Every one of us needs support on this journey. And that's something that all the case studies that we talked about today, they all had something in common. It was this: they had support. Talk to people. Who else has the programs that you have? What have they done to resolve, if anything? Get together. Figure this out together. Research all over to get the sense of the biological purpose. You need to know the biological purpose. You need to know that more than anything. And of course, learn the bioswitch as well. Learn the bioswitch technique that Danny Carroll has. That can be very, very effective. Once you have more skills, you have more self-awareness, an increased ability to downgrade the conflict active phase, to find and apply biological solutions, or change your perspective. So are you ready? It leads to freedom, body sovereignty, health sovereignty, freedom from the fear of disease. The journey of GHK takes us on is an inner journey of self-awareness, and thus it leads to a higher consciousness. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I encourage you to find your journey. Find somebody to walk on it with you. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation, and namaste.